And joining us in studio, Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Always great to have you, Tom.
Thank you. Good to be with you both.
Michael Cohen sentenced to 3 years yesterday. Do you think that was a fair sentencing? 3 years? Did he get a good deal?
I guess it depends on your point of view. If you think he's the worst man in American history to have ever been around a president, you probably think he got too little time. But if you think that maybe he would never have been prosecuted but for his relationship to Donald Trump, you have to question the whole prosecution. You know, my concern is he pled guilty to tax fraud. You didn't need a special counsel for that. He pled guilty to campaign finance violations that I don't think were actual campaign finance violations, so pleading guilty to non-crimes. And he also pled guilty to lying on his home equity loans and shuffling money around in a way that resulted in no losses for any banks. So it sounds to me like a lot of noise and a lot more caterwauling about Donald Trump and an excuse to attack him, as opposed to justice being meted out in a serious way.
Well, it's a combination of from both Mueller's prosecution, but specifically the Southern District of New York seems to be using both Michael Cohen and the company that owns the National Enquirer as the groundwork for their case to go after Donald Trump. It's crystal clear. These are all steps to go after the president of the United States. What do you think of this Southern District of New York and the way they're pursuing these cases?
Well, the Southern District of New York is competing with the Mueller operation to destroy Donald Trump. And to me, this is a kind of a deep state enterprise. They're acting as impeachment counsel for the House or the incoming House Democrats. They probably take the legal position they can't indict the president. So they're intimating criminal activity by the president in a way that I'm sure is going to generate increased calls for impeachment. And I think it's just an abuse of office. The Justice Department has no business doing this. And when you're willing just to go after someone, you start making up crimes, such as third-party payments or direct payments personally for confidentiality agreements get translated into illegal campaign finance contributions. And that's to me, an indication that there's something amiss with the way the Justice Department, and it is the Justice Department in the end that's doing all of this, is targeting President Trump.
Well, and if they choose to impeach him on illegal campaign violations or illegal campaign finance violations, we just had Hans on, and Hans von Spakovsky, and he was saying that the prosecution of all campaign finance crimes have to be coordinated with the public integrity sector of the criminal division in Washington, D.C. And he said there's no one on the finance committee, on the council, the election council, that would say that this is a crime. He seemed to think that there was no crime committed here. There was no violation. We already know that. So they wouldn't be able to get anywhere with impeachment on this anyway.
Well, remember, impeachment's a political question. So you had a political argument arguably being made by the Justice Department. They induced Cohen as part of this plea negotiation to plead guilty to this. And just because they say collectively it's a crime and the court's not going to get in the way of that, the court's not going to second-guess that, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean that House Democrats who have it into President Trump are going to pick up that cudgel and use it against him. And remember, all they need is a majority plus one in the House to impeach the president. Obviously, they need a larger majority in the Senate to remove him. But, you know, what are we talking about here? We're talking about campaign finance violations, right?
Right.
I thought we were all supposed to be worried about Russia taking over the country and abusing, working and colluding with the Trump people illegally to steal the election. That's so yesterday. And it just shows you that this was never about justice. It was about trying to find something on Trump. And no American should be subject to this type of special prosecutor, meaning you get a special prosecutor personally, and they're just going to spend all their time trying to investigate you and your associates to figure out crimes that you may have engaged in.
Well, we have a microcosm of that approach in the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, who has announced that she plans to launch sweeping, and this is according to NBC, sweeping investigations into President Trump, his family, and anyone in his circle who may have violated the law. In other words, she's picking targets, not crimes. and going after them in search of crimes. This is a perverse execution of justice.
Yeah, typically public officials wait till they get in office to abuse office. The incoming Attorney General of New York is abusing office and she's not even in there yet.
Right.
And it's unethical. And certainly if you're President Trump subjected to this type of scrutiny, you're going to have a strong defense in the courts perhaps to shut it all down.
Very interesting. We've got more with Tom Fitton coming up. It is 7:43 on WMAL. We are joined by Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch, sitting in studio with us. Lots of questions for him. Tom, one of these developments in the sentencing of General Flynn, is that his lawyers on Tuesday filed a petition claiming that he was basically set up. He was ambushed, that he was not told that he could have a lawyer present. He didn't realize this was an official questioning by the FBI. And now you have a U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan asking for Robert Mueller to turn over all of their documents and memoranda related to that questioning. Flynn going to be pardoned? Flynn going to walk here?
He ought to be pardoned. I don't know if the president's going to do it now. He's not facing jail time, according at least to the sentencing recommendations of the special prosecutor. So he may not face anything in terms of, threats to his freedom immediately. But Judge Sullivan has a reputation for holding the government to account. He was involved in going after the Justice Department for their abusive and corrupt prosecution of former late Senator Ted Stevens. The Flynn thing is so corrupt.
Yeah.
You had this idea of the Logan Act, which is a law never enforced, as a pretext to go after him. And I was telling Vince during the break, I don't know if you overheard, Mary, but James Comey over the weekend admitted, well, he set this whole thing up. He realized that it was the beginning of the administration. They could get FBI agents into the White House to interview this high-level official without having to go through the regular procedures. And there's no indication, again, Comey confirmed this in his testimony to the House, there was no physical indication Flynn lied, yet somehow Peter Strzok, the corrupt FBI agent, and his colleagues somehow divined he lied. Now, on top of that, the 302 that Judge Sullivan wants to see was written in August of 2017. Mm-hmm. The interview was in January of 2017. So the actual report, I guess, was ginned up months after the fact and after Peter Strzok was removed from the investigation by Mueller because of his anti-Trump biased texts and I guess his illicit relationship with Lisa Page.
So if we find out that if all of this is dropped against Flynn because Emmett Sullivan, the judge, decides that, you know what, this was all done wrong, this can't stand, what does Flynn get back? Can he sue? Because he's lost everything. They've bankrupted this man.
Well, Flynn isn't not unpleading guilty. He's already pled guilty.
Right.
And he's acknowledged that even though this stuff happened, he acknowledges that he lied. But the judge has an independent authority to look into this. And so you may have a case of the judge asking the Justice Department what went on here and expressing dissatisfaction, allowing the agreement to go forward. And this is why we have pardons to kind of fix situations like this.
Tom, this is big news I want to shift to today for you. You are testifying on Capitol Hill. To what committee are you testifying, and what's the subject matter today?
The House Oversight Committee, Mark Meadows is running a subcommittee hearing on the Clinton Foundation. Huber, the infamous or mysterious Mr. Huber, was supposed to testify, but I'll be there talking about all of our fines exposing pay-to-play activities by the Clinton Foundation and the lack of interest by the IRS, DOJ, or virtually any other law enforcement agency into what they were doing there.
What do you have against Russians giving to AIDS research? How dare you?
$500,000 to Bill Clinton while his wife was Secretary of State, a Russia front company. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
You always wonder why they gave all that money to the Clinton Foundation, of all places.
And you better watch it. You might find yourself the victim of a raid on your home, like some whistleblower we know.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, good luck. Don't lie. Just a word to the wise.
Yeah, come on, Tom. Tell the truth for once.
I swear to tell the truth.
Oh, good.